Yo, what is up guys? And today we have another tier list for you guys. As you guys can see on your screen here, this is going to be for Moonlight 5-star units for PvP. Now we're doing this tier list because the meta has shaken up a lot, especially with ML Landy's release. And we're just going to talk about what I personally think about how these Moonlight 5-star units actually rank in PvP. Now this will include all of RTA, all of Arena offense and defense, and also Guild Wars as well. We're just going to talk about these units and how well they fare in the current meta. So we have pretty much 6 tiers here. S, these units are going to be the best of the best. A tier units, these units will still be very powerful. You'll see them pretty frequently. B tier units, these units will be a bit more niche. C tier units, these units are technically usable, but there are going to be better options. And we have Cleavers tier, so these units are going to be primarily for Cleavers, pretty much only for Cleavers, honestly. And then we also have Blood Moon Haste tier, which is a pretty sad story, but this unit is terrible. Please buff him, Smilegate. I literally pulled 2 copies of him, and yeah, he's just sitting on my bench. But this unit, just terrible, so pretty sad. But yeah, let's start off with the S tier. So starting off at the top of S tier, we have Navy Captain Landy. Now the reason why I have this unit at the top of S tier is because she's everywhere on defense for Guild Wars, everywhere in defense for Arena, and also first picked all the time or banned frequently in RTA. Now, although there are counters to her, including like Lionheart Sermia, even ML Ken after the buffs, or even ML Bellona, the thing is with ML Landy is if you see her in any form of PvP, like you have to draft your entire team comp around her because she's just so powerful because of her, I guess, casino slot machine mechanic, where if she just counters over and over, even if you bring a ton of counters, she'll just one-shot your team, right? If she actually gets that S3 off, usually you lose the battle, so you're kind of in a situation where you have to kill her before she stacks her Fighting Spirit, or you lose. And it's just really unfun to play against, honestly. So I know it's preseason, but I've been playing RTA because I've been bored, and I'm currently Emperor. But yeah, this unit, I first pick her no matter what is banned, because I just hate playing against her. So yes, she is very powerful, but a lot of the times you'll end up picking her because you don't want to play against her, because if you guys have fought ML Landys, like, you know how frustrating it is when she counters like 3 times in a row, and then S3s when you bring like a full team comp that's supposed to counter her, right? She will hand you a ton of defeats in Guild Wars that you probably should not have actually lost. You probably should have won, but because you just get unlucky on certain timings, Navy Captain Landy can just win those battles. And for that reason, we have her in the top of S tier, right? She's just really annoying, really toxic, but still very, very powerful and sometimes very fun to play. Now, Conquer Elias. So Conquer Elias, a lot of people think she's not as good as anymore with, like, you know, Ocean Breeze Lutka and Lionheart Sermia. But I still think she's very powerful, right? Because Vigor buff on the spellable attack and defense is crazy. Even against Lionheart Sermias, if you do have like a SC Arrowell to tank the Lionheart Sermia S3, or a Yulha, or even LRK with Aureus, then you can actually still win against them. And I like Conquer Elias because she's very flexible, because you can use her in Cleave, you can use her in Aggro, you can use her in Standard, right? There's a lot of options to use her, and she's a very good speed contester with her high speed. Next, we have Meter Cowrick. Meter Cowrick is very powerful as well. Full cleanse on his S3 for his team. You can't even like really stun him out of it or silence him out of it, because his S3 does actually reduce buff or debuff durations on him by 1 turn, so he's good against AOL and SC Arrowell. He's also very powerful because he has turn cycling in his S1, has a huge barrier for his team with his S2, has his full strip, has attack down, makes him very good into units like Lionheart Sermia if they're not built on effect resist. Also very good into any units that provide attack buff to themselves. So very, very powerful unit, and just a staple. The only weakness is that he's very susceptible to Cleave. So against Cleave, he doesn't have damage mitigation, and if he doesn't take a turn, he's pretty much useless. And because most people actually build Meter Cowricks at around like 220 to 250 speed, depending on how you want to use him, if you actually fight a Cleave team, even if you get your Warhorn proc, you won't even cut most of the time. So that's why he's very, very weak against Cleave. But still, overall, except for against Cleave, very, very powerful. Next, we have Lionheart Sermia. So after her buffs, she's actually very good. She has that CR push on her S2, making it so that she can turn cycle way faster with her speed buff already on her S1. And her S3 hits like a truck. People have been running her on the full damage build, where you're going like 2200 defense, max crit damage on Golden Rose, and she can just one-shot teams completely if you don't have Aureus. And even if you do have an Aureus, or like a, you know, SC Arrowell, you can do a ton of damage to the Arrowell, and with 2 S3s, you will pretty much one-shot that Arrowell or kill out Arrowell. So very powerful unit, very strong into units like Navy Captain Landy and Concorlius. The thing is, she's weak to a lot of units as well. So even though she counters Concorlius and Navy Captain Landy, you can actually one-shot her with a lot of units before she takes her turn, right? ML Ken can deal with her, Cleave units are very good against her, Briar Witch Assaria is very good against her, S10 is good against her, right? So if you can actually nuke her down before she gets her turn, then she's pretty useless, obviously, because she's dead, but she's very squishy if you build her on the full damage build, and if you don't build her on the full damage build, even against ML Landys, you might lose if she gets her fighting spirit up. So you saw in the Epic 7 World Championship, everyone picked ML Landy, people answer with Lionheart Zermia, and even then, the win rates were pretty split because Navy Captain Landy, like I said, even against her quote-unquote counter picks, can steal wins. Zeo, so this unit is super powerful, pretty much a must pull. I'm pretty sure he's coming back in rotation in a few months, but he's very good because you don't need high speed gear on him to actually outspeed because of his passive, making him a free-to-play friendly, like turn 1 style. Very good in cleave, very good against cleave because you can contest turn 1. Very good in standard. If you have him on a full damage build, you can actually use him as a solo DPS. It's pretty good. Very flexible unit and just very powerful. The only reason why I have him a bit lower is because on defense teams he's not that good. You can see like Concorlius and Navy Captain Landy all the time in defense teams. But for Zeo, you won't really see him, even though in maybe RTA he's like very similarly contested. Next we have ML Kraus. This unit's very good. AoE damage, immunity buff, barrier for your team. He also does a ton of damage as a knight, which makes him very powerful. And honestly, because of LRK's like rise of the meta, it kind of forced out like S10A. So I think that makes him very good because with him in the meta right now, it makes S10A a very powerful unit, a little bit less played. So because of that, he's very powerful, and because he does a ton of damage and can hold Aureus and has mitigation, I think he's a very powerful unit. I personally think SC Arrowell is better than him, but I think he is a very close second, and in some situations, he might even be better than SC Arrowell. But I think overall, the 3-star White Knight Arrowell is going to be better than LRK, in my opinion, from my experience, but LRK still very powerful as a RTA unit. Also, this unit is like very good for arena offense. If you're trying to climb to arena like Legend 1 to get your Skystones, LRK is probably the best knight because he can mitigate. He just resets his S3 over and over, and his S3 hits like a truck. Next we have Bellion. So Bellion actually fell down a bit, honestly, because you have units like Navy Captain Landy that counter her, you have Lionheart Zermia that counters her, right? And just not as powerful as before, also because there's like a lot more injury units. But she's still very good, right? You can pick her into any cleave team that relies on souls. You can pick her as a unit to actually take down S10A. You can use her on many different builds, like there's even very fast Bellions on high effectiveness nowadays in Guild Wars, which are very annoying to deal with. You can always fight against injury Bellions, which are very annoying. There can even be just standard counter on Elbrus Bellions, which destroys cleave, so you never really know what kind of Bellion you're fighting, which is kind of why she's very powerful. And she just shuts down the Soulburn mechanic, which makes her very strong. Next we have Briar Witch Assaria. This is mostly going to be Guild Wars offense and RTA unit, but she's so freaking good. She's extremely powerful into those really annoying evasion units like Savior Aiden, and also just Remnant Violets if you fight them. She's also very good against units where you want a defense break, because her S3 can actually ignore effect resist if you actually Soulburn it, which makes it very powerful. You put it unbuffable and defense break. And she stops revive, which is very good against like maid Chloe teams. This unit just hits like a truck, and honestly, even though you build her full damage, she can survive for so long because of her S2 mortality. And also if you get Guiding Light procs, it makes it hard to actually proc that immortality and even take her out the next turn. So she's a lot more survivable than you actually think, which makes her very powerful, and her damage is crazy high. Next we have Pirate Captain Flan. This unit is very good because she can lock down a single unit. You're gonna see her all the time picked in RTA against turn 2 teams. Very powerful, very toxic unit, honestly, because she just permalocks down a unit and just does a ton of damage, and very bulky with CR push on her team. So very powerful unit. She's a bit more niche, but I think like she's just so annoying and so powerful in the right situations. I have to put her in the S tier. Probably my most wanted ML 5-star right now. I didn't pull her because she was pretty bad at the start, but hopefully I do get her soon because she's super annoying. Next we have S10A. So S10A used to be like the top of S tier. Now she's probably at the bottom, maybe even A tier territory. And that's because, yeah, there's a lot of counters to her, right? Lionheart Zermia picked all the time. Navy Captain Landy picked all the time, so it's hard to play her. She gets almost one-shot by those units. LRK destroys her. Bellion destroys her. Briar Witch area is good against her, right? So you kind of get what I'm saying. There's too much AoE in the meta, whereas in the metas where she's very powerful is usually with units that just don't do a lot of AoE damage, right? Like APOC Ravi and stuff like that. So for that reason, she has fallen down. Now I want to talk about the A tier units. These units are very powerful, still frequently used, but I think the S tier units are just way more universal and can be picked a lot more earlier in RTA and can be slapped into defense teams way more easily. And honestly, their builds are a lot more flexible. All of these units can be built in different ways that might surprise you, so you never really know what you're fighting against. That's why these S tier units are so powerful, because you might get surprised by their build, and obviously they have very strong kits. So we have A tier, so we have ML Leica. Very commonly paired with strays in RTA, right? You just pick them on 4 or 5 and you have to ban one and you're kind of screwed if you don't have a speed contester. But Architect Leica is very good because if you don't face Rebellion, because she can hold her own Taga Hells, what you do is you just soul burn your S2, one-shot a unit, and you pretty much win. So very, very powerful. Strays is kind of the same, right? If you have them very fast, you just S3 and you pretty much win. So these units can delete one unit at the start of the game. Only thing is their base speed isn't as high as units like Concilius, Lua, Zio, stuff like that, so you have to make sure you take the first turn. But in the right situations, these two units will one-shot those units. Now, APOC Ravi. So you guys might be surprised why I'm in the A tier. I think a lot of people actually have dropped her down a bit because this meta is just not good for her. APOC Ravi is just very, very weak against Cleave, and she's not that good into the meta units, right? So like Navy Captain Landy can actually destroy her because if you actually don't crit with your S tier Navy Captain Landy, you just lose, and the chances of that happening is less than the chances of it happening, so APOC Ravi is automatically not that great. Concilius can control her. Meteor Coward can also kind of control her. If you land your S2 onto APOC Ravi, her S3 won't really kill for a while. Lionheart Cermia does get countered a bit by APOC Ravi, but the thing is, if Lionheart Cermia procs her S2, then APOC Ravi's S3 can't kill. Zio can control her. LRK, not really a big factor in it because he has just mitigation. Bellion can control her. Briar Witch Caesarea can also stop the revive. ML Flank is probably APOC Ravi's hardest counter. Spectre Tenebria can S3 her, right? There's just so many things that are not in APOC Ravi's favor right now. And you also have new units, right? You have like, for example, Urban Shadow Shoe, which is going to put a lot of injuries onto her and make her pretty much unplayable because Urban Shadow Shoe is probably the best injury unit in the game. Even like green units like Zahak and Valencia are very good against her. So there's just a lot of things makes her less played, but she's still solid, right? Don't get me wrong, I think she's still a very solid pick. She's not that OP anchor like she was before in every single comp, but you can pick her in the right situations if they don't have that much CC, and you know, if the teams are like health scaling and they don't have too much injury. So there's a lot of conditions now, but she's still very good in her own right. You can still put her on defense teams and she'll be good. You can still pick her in RTA and you'll find yourself winning battles because of her, but she's not like a insta first pick anymore like before, and because of that I'm going to put her in the A tier because the meta is just not good for her. Next we have Urban Shadow Shoes. So honestly, I think I overrate this unit because yeah, it's like recency bias. I've been playing her a lot, I'm not gonna lie, but this unit is pretty fucking strong in my opinion. Like this unit is crazy with injuries. She counters so many units, even units that don't scale with health she's very good against, because if you cycle fast enough, once you get your second S3 off on a unit, usually they're just dead, even against like Navy Captain Landies, and you don't really rely on critting too much because most of her damage is her S2. The only thing is she's weak to unbuffable, right? So units like anything with unbuffable, so like Peyra, you have like Angel of Light, just stuff like that can really mess her up, but she's very, very good. Her injuries stack like crazy, she does a ton of damage, she has self-sustain, and you're always feeling like you're on a timer against her, which I really hate. It's kind of like Navy Captain Landy, but to a lesser extent, because she won't one-shot your entire team, she'll one-shot like one unit. So yeah, I think she's very fun, I think she's very good, but you're not going to really use her as much as you think, right? Because even though there's a ton of health scaling units, keep in mind she gets countered hard by fast units and by unbuffable, like I stated. She's a good counter to APOC Ravi, and even like LRK and like Meteor Coward can just HP scaling in general. Okay, next up we have Lone Crescent Bellona. So yeah, you guys might hate me if I don't put her in S tier because she's waifu AF. I'm not gonna lie, she's pretty insane design wise, but in reality, like her usage is mostly going to be used against units like Bellion. Also, like she's very good against ML Landy because you can one-shot her actually, and she's just good against AoE damage in general because of her passive. So yeah, Most of the time though, you're only going to pick her into ML Landy, but like I said, ML Landy is everywhere, so that's why she's A tier. But very, very good unit into ML Landy. Remnant Violet, pretty decent against very tanky teams. So Remnant Violet is like either going to be top of S tier or worse than Blood Moon Haste, depending on the game. If he just doesn't dodge, you just lose, right? Because it gets one shot. Because he's a thief, he's pretty squishy. But if he does dodge everything and then one shots with his S3 and gets multiple S3s off, very, very powerful. The only thing is you need him on what is that thief artifact that counters when you dodge? You have a chance to counter. Double-edged Crescent, I believe it's Urbalen's artifact. You really want him on that artifact. It makes him very, very powerful because it helps him get more S3s off. Because if he dodges, he gets one focus. If he counterattacks after that dodge because of the artifact, you get another focus. And you need him on lifesteal sets. So yeah, it's the only way you can actually counter. Yeah, like I said, very good into tanky units because he can take over games. Very good into AoE because he can actually stack his passive or his focus fast. Also very good into Lionheart Cermia, but you have to keep in mind that if he doesn't dodge, he gets one shot. So kind of like a Casino, but different than ML Landy Casino, because ML Landy Casino is like, it's not going to be whether she dies or lives, it's if she's going to counter and stack faster. Remnant Violet, like this guy's like on the edge all the time. Like he's going to die to the next attack if you don't dodge, or you dodge and you're happy. So yeah, for that reason, it's pretty good. Now we have ML Ken recently buffed. So ML Ken used to be like Blood Moon Haste here, which is kind of funny that I'm calling it Blood Moon Haste here. But after the buffs, I think he's pretty solid, right? He can do pretty well against ML Landy. I wouldn't say he's like a super hard counter, but he is a counter. He's good against AoE because he has like that built-in counter attack now, even when your allies get hit. And he's just very annoying to deal with. He's also kind of Casino. And when I say Casino, guys, I mean like very high RNG, because if you don't counter, he's pretty useless. But when you do counter, very, very powerful. Next we have Solitaria. So Solitaria, this unit can also be S tier sometimes, but also can be like C tier, I'd say. She's very good into units that use focus, because she stops focus gains. So she's very good against Remnant Violet, good against Ocean Breeze Luca, etc., etc. And she's very annoying because she has so many debuffs, so much CC. She has stealth, and she also has fixed damage if you have her on Fairy Tale Tenebria's artifact, meaning you can build her fully bulky, fully effectiveness, and she'll still be able to do decent damage while CCing your team. The only thing is, if you don't take the first turn with her, she kind of just dies. Especially because like if you have Conqueror's provoking her, she kind of dies if you don't have her on effect resist, and she's pretty weak against cleave. But if you can pick her into slow teams that don't have a lot of cleansing, then she's very, very powerful. Alright, so we're breaking into the B tier. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker because these units are going to be more niche. We'll just talk about their niche and try to get through them quickly because this list is pretty long. Dark Corvus, very good into ML Landy comps, especially for Guild Wars offense. This guy is the Guild Wars offense hero. Pick him with like Asaria and like Destina or Ruel, and you can win pretty much 95% of Guild Wars of defenses because you just S3, you know, keep him alive, S3 again, keep him alive, slow run S3 again, and you win. So very good there. In RTA, he can be used against very tanky, low damage teams, but that's pretty much it. Vicious Tywin, man, this unit, like, I know he's not like super broken, but every time I play against him, it feels like he's super broken because of his CC. But I think he's very good, but I'm going to put him in the B tier just because there's a lot of answers to him actually. You just, you know, need to pick injury and just cleansing. But the thing is, like, with Ambitious Tywin, if he starts popping off with his S3 Soulburns, like, he will take over games. He just defense breaks you, stuns you, super annoying. Maybe I should put him in A tier. I'm going to put him in the B tier for now because I feel like some games he's useless, and he is a pretty late pick, I'd say, and you only will ever see him in RTA. Next, we have a Meru. So I think I rate her a bit highly. I think most people put her down like here, but I'm going to put her here because very good with her seal. She can seal Navy Captain Landy, which makes it so you can crit her. She does a ton of damage. She's very tanky, and she is super annoying. So for that reason, I have her in the B tier. If you pick her into team comps that really rely on their passive, like Alencia teams and stuff like that, Navy Captain Landy teams, right, then you can do very well. And she's just super annoying to deal with, and a very good pick on 4 and 5 for RTA, and pretty decent in Guild Wars offense as well. Next, we have Astromancer Elena. You might be wondering why I don't have her in the cleave tier. Actually, I just forgot, but we're gonna put her in the B tier because I've seen some people actually use her not in cleave, kind of as just like a tanky unit to stop counters. But she's very good because she's very good against Navy Captain Landy, right? You can cleave Navy Captain Landys with Astromancer Elena. Also just good against like Bellions in general. So like in Guild Wars, or not Guild Wars offense, well, even in Guild Wars offense, but Arena offense especially, if you want to cleave through into Legend, you kind of need this unit because everything has counter nowadays. So Astromancer Elena is probably required, I'd say, for cleaving in Arena now, especially in the higher ranks, because she just shuts down counters, which is pretty much the only answer to cleave in Arena defense. DJ Bazaar, very good. You can insta-pick him into Payra teams, and he will almost one-shot the Payra with his S2, if she puts up the barrier, of course. She's also very good against SC Airwell and Meter Cowrick because of the barriers, right? He can actually do a ton against those AoE barriers. Also good against LRK. The only thing is, he's pretty squishy, and outside of his S2 and S3, like let's say you pick him into like SC Airwell, for example, and you're just waiting for SC Airwell to put up that S3. Well, while you're waiting and you're doing the stall battle between, like the standoff between who will put the barrier up and who will, you know, use their S2, S3 first. The thing is, DJ Bazaar is kind of useless, whereas SC Airwell can actually keep escort. So besides his S2 and S3, he's pretty weak, I'd say. And then once he actually does use his S3, which is like his big immunity push-up, he becomes very squishy and one-shottable because, yeah, he is pretty squishy. You want to build him very fast and on very high ER. So you actually can't afford to put too much bulk into him. So once his S3 goes down, he's going to die. So yeah, for that reason, I'm in the B tier. In theory, he seems very good, but he's only good in like low damage metas, I'd say. But right now we have a ton of damage, so he's not that great. DDR, Death Deal Array. Yeah, I hate this unit. So this unit is super toxic. He has that Pestilence thing. Pairs very well with Sharoon and Solitaria. If you want to play control, this is like the best way to do it with Death Deal Array. Just keep in mind, the reason why I don't have him higher is because you might fall asleep when playing him because his RTA matches take more than like 8 minutes, I'd say, on average. And it's just very slow. Only going to really be used in RTA, but if you love control, then definitely pick him with like Sharoon, and if you have Solitaria with her as well. And you'll have a lot of fun, but the other opponent probably won't. Next we have Maid Chloe. So Maid Chloe, there's a lot of Maid Chloe lovers out there for RTA, but I don't think she's that great because you have to build your entire account around this unit. Like, you want to have all your DPS reach 100% ER with Shamaja's staff and Maid Chloe on your team. So you're going to have to invest some ER into them, like 40%, 30%-ish, which makes her a bit weird to play sometimes without her. If she ends up getting banned in that comp in RTA, like your entire team might fall apart. But besides that, she's pretty decent, I'd say, but not as OP as before because we have like Briar Wichasaria, we have Navy Captain Landy, and you're probably wondering, why does Navy Captain Landy counter Maid Chloe? Well, Maid Chloe comps take forever to ramp up, and in that time, Navy Captain Landy can get like 2 S3s off, and you're probably going to lose. Next we have Faithless Lytica. So this unit, pretty decent as a cleave unit, right? Because she has her S2, which does a ton of damage, AoE, and then her S3, which pushes your team up with skill Nully. Very good against Meter Cowrick, right? Anything you want to skill reset. Only thing is her speed tier is a bit low compared to other openers, so it's hard to take the first turn with her against units like Conquer Lilius and Lua. But if you do, she's very powerful. Also, keep in mind with her S2, it's not a extra turn, it's 25% CR on herself for every enemy hit. So against like AOLs, you can actually get cut very, very easily, so you have to be very careful. Against like Warhorn units, if that Warhorn procs, you might get cut. So yeah, not always guaranteed to get that extra turn, so you have to be very, very careful. Sage Balls can cut her very easily as well. Fallen Cecilia, very good tank with mitigation. The only thing is, her main mitigation is barriers, and there's a ton of barrier countering units, right? DJ Bazaar, you have units such as Arunka, you also have units such as, there's more barrier units, right? What else counters barriers? Like, I guess Ning Ning, and yeah, like Operator Sigurd as well, probably her biggest counter, right? So you have to be careful using her, but she's still pretty decent, I'd say. Just pick her a bit later, and you only really want to pick her into Cleave that doesn't have Opsig. Okay, next we have Designer Lilbet. Used to be very, very good, but not anymore because of the fact that her biggest strength was that she could cut, right, and then use her S3 and cleanse herself. But nowadays, people, like all these like top tier units that are picked, right, they don't really rely on landing their debuffs, right? Like Navy Captain Landy doesn't have debuffs, Conquer Lilius doesn't have 2 S3 yet at the beginning, Meter Cowrick doesn't have debuffs, right? Like none of these really have really powerful debuffs, and for the most part, you're only going to really want to pick her into Cleave. Yeah, she's very good against like units such as like Payra and Ran. When those units were first picked all the time in RTA, she was very powerful. But against, like not against Cleave, she's not that great. And her damage, in my opinion, needs a buff. Okay, next we have Sage Ball. Good against Cleave, that is pretty much it. But a very good Sage Ball will be like S tier, right? Against Cleave, like probably top, like one of the best anti-Cleave units. but you need him to be very tanky, you need him to be very fast and very high ER, so it's very hard to do that. And effectiveness is very nice as well, so he needs a lot of good, like a lot of stats and a lot of good gear. But if you can gear him, he's very, very good against cleave. Yeah, just extremely powerful. Just make sure you don't pick him into units that can reset his skill cooldowns and have ignore effect resist soul burns, which we have a ton of now, so I guess he's not as good as before, but still pretty decent against cleave. Spirit Eye Celine, kind of a similar boat to Archdemon Shadow. Like, this unit can actually solo like win you games. Very good against like units APOC Ravi, right? Anything that doesn't have double attacks or extra attacks, very good, because you need like 2 or 3 hits to take her down, depending on if she has a barrier or not, which makes her very, very powerful. Very good on Guild Wars defense and very good in RTA as a last pick. Sylvan Sage Vivian, very good against units that have only, kind of similar to Spirit Eye Celine actually, like only 1 hit because of her focus. But keep in mind, like, she gets countered by Solitaria, and she can actually get one-shot by units such as Rimuru and Ikarina, similar to Spirit Eye Celine, so you have to be very, very careful. Next, we have MLK. So you did recently get buffed, but in my opinion, still not that great, as S3 still doesn't do that much damage. The buffs were okay, but I personally think he needs more buffs. He just takes way too long to ramp up. And against, like, if you pick him, right, and he wants to play very slow, right, units such as, like, Navy Captain Landy and Lionheart Zermia can pretty much just one-shot him, so not that great. Also, if you invest not enough ER into him, he can get controlled very easily by AOLs and even ML Flans, so yeah, very hard to build him. He needs, like, bulk, he needs damage, and he needs a ton of ER. I just think ER Thieves are just not in a good spot. I think ER, like, effect resist needs to be completely reworked for him to ever be like S tier, or he just needs a rework in general, or just damage buffs. So now we're in C tier. These units are not that great. They can still be used, and we're going to talk about the brief, like, very briefly in those niches. So LQC, good against a ton of dark units, mostly for Guild Wars offense. You can bring her out in RTA, but she dies very easily, and she's very slow, so you need someone to boost her up. So, like, usually with, like, Amids, or more commonly, like, Amelia's, she's very common. But besides that, she's not going to be really that great, even though she can one-shot, like, dark units. She used to be picked a lot into APOC Ravi, but you don't really see that unit as much anymore. And yeah, against units such as, like, Spectre Tenebria and Briarwitch Cesaria, they're going to be in stealth, right, on the first turn with Guiding Light on Briarwitch Cesaria, and Zio will just, you know, silence her. So there's a lot of ways to play around her now. Tamara Luca used to be very good in cleave, right? She has that AoE CR push with attack buff. Thing is, she gets countered by non-attack skill counter units like Politis, Celine, Ocean Breeze Luca, so not that great anymore. And without the attack buff, like, your S3 is not going to one-shot most of the time, but her S3 does hit very hard. The only thing is she needs a ton of stats. She needs damage and she needs speed, right? So she's kind of like Green Sid in a way, like Assassin Sid, but you need a little bit more damage, like more crit damage and attack on her, because her speed scaling isn't as good as, like, Green Sid and Ace Sid. Now we have Ruel. So Ruel, not that great. Good against very slow team comps, but there are a lot of units that are good against very slow team comps, like Navy Captain Landy, like I've said a million times, the Inspector Tenebria, APOC Ravi, Urban Shadow Shoe, Solitaire, just a ton of good units into slow team comps. Ruel just puts you in a situation where you are stalling out the battle, but there's a lot of counters to stalled out battles now, so yeah, not that great. You can use her as, like, a dark bait in Guild Wars offense, but you might as well use SC Doris. She's way better and will make your Guild Wars a lot quicker. Opsig, used as a barrier counter, but not many barriers in the meta right now, and yeah, just not that great overall, so we have her in the C tier. Judge Kisei, too hard to build. You need her to be very fast, high effectiveness, or you need her to be a cleaver, but cleaving with Judge Kisei is kind of pointless because other units do more damage, and the skill set, although it's nice, her speed tier isn't as high as other units, so it's hard to get her fast. Silverblade Araminta, very fun unit, don't get me wrong, one of my favorite ML5 stars to use, but she gets hard countered by cleave. She gets hard countered by faster units that can shut her down, and yeah, just very hard to use. You need, like, the perfect scenario. Next we have Arbiter Vildred, not that good. This unit used to be best unit in the game, but like I said, there's a ton of counters to revive now, and even if you don't have a counter to revive, you just take an extra turn with, like, Lionheart Zermia, like Spectre Tenebria, you'll just end up dying, and he just doesn't do enough damage with his S3 unless you proc Gab on every single turn. But even then, I've seen Arbiter Vildreds proc their Lexus Basket, like, every turn and still not do enough damage to carry, like, the damage, so yeah, he needs a buff. Next we have Specimen Says. This unit is going to be paired with stun units such as, like, SB Araminta, but kind of gimmicky. He has counterattack potential, so you can build him on a bruiser build and have him on effectiveness and bulk, but yeah, very reliant on RNG. And then that means you have to, you know, also invest in effectiveness, which will lower his damage. And a lot of units have high cleansing nowadays, and like some units can't even be stunned, like Navy Captain Landy, yada yada yada, which makes him a lot weaker. Now we have cleavers, so yeah, these units are going to be used for cleave. Requiem Rowana is the best because of the skill reset. You just build her on like 200% effectiveness, and she's very good with units like Peyra, Zio, just any cleave team in general, very flexible. Closer Charles, very good CR pusher for your team, does a ton of damage, has attack buff, very good bridge unit. Commander Pavel used to be really good as well, but now you don't see him anymore because there's a lot of anti-crit in the game with Navy Captain Landy, especially. So yeah, if you don't ban Navy Captain Landy and they pick her, then you can't really pick Commander Pavel. It kind of just shows what you're going to ban. And if you do end up banning Navy Captain Landy in the pre-bans for RTA, then you're leaving up like Bellion or just like other anti-cleave units like Edward Elric and stuff like that. So you're kind of opening yourself up to more counters, so it's not really wise to pick him. And yeah, Navy Captain Landy is in every defense, and also, yeah, every defense. So hard to really use him in Arena and Guild Wars. And we have Blood Moon Haste. Yeah, this unit needs a buff. Nothing much to be said. Like, he doesn't really do damage. His healing is non-existent, really. His damage mitigation for himself only is just not the best. And yeah, not really a lot of units that revive. So yeah, for that reason, he's in his own tier below everyone else. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this tier list, guys. It was very fun making it. And yeah, this is just my opinion. Like, let me know if you guys have any differing ones. And I'll see you guys next video. Peace.